Hey guys, so welcome back for another talk. Today I want to talk a little bit about you are not your beliefs, you are not your ideas, you are not your thoughts. Before I get into that, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon. They make these talks possible by supporting me financially. I also want to thank everyone who has subscribed to the YouTube channel, everyone who comments on the talks and videos and classes, and everyone who gives a thumbs up. All those things really help me out and help spread the love. So today's talk is about beliefs and ideas and the ego and how the ego takes possession of these things. So what you might find, what most people find in their life, is when someone questions a belief or an idea that you have, you very often take it personally, you get offended, you get defensive, you might get angry, or you might get upset, depending on how you deal with those types of things. You might find yourself going into a reactionary pattern, getting triggered. And this is very common for human beings. We put a lot into our beliefs, into our ideas, into our thoughts. And this can create a lot of suffering for us. So while thought, an idea, an abstract thought, beliefs are very powerful as a constructive force, it's not that we want as human beings to stop thinking. I think some people think that meditation and yoga is about not having thoughts. That's not my experience or belief at all. Rather, I think that yoga and Buddhism and the right reading of any great spiritual tradition like, say, Christianity, is that really we want to develop the right relationship with our thoughts. When we have the wrong relationship with our thoughts and our beliefs and our ideas, we suffer quite a lot, and we can create a lot of suffering for other people. When we have the right relationship with our thoughts, when we question our thoughts, when we don't take them at face value as necessarily true, when we realize that an opposite thought can be just as true as a thought that we hold to be true and that we cherish, we start to free ourselves from being tyrannized by our thoughts and the suffering that our beliefs and our ideas and our thoughts can cause. And that's really what this teaching is all about, what yoga is all about. It's really about liberation from that suffering, and how do we create that? How do we get there? So why do we, when someone questions our thoughts or our beliefs or our ideas, or someone disagrees, why do we get offended? Why do we take that personally? Why do we feel as though we're being attacked? Well, as is often the case with spirituality, the answer is usually in something we call the ego. So, what is the ego? Well, the ego is a set of unexamined ideas or beliefs, sense perceptions, and emotions that sort of come together to create an illusion of a separate and individual self. Most of us call this illusion me, or I. But the true I, the spiritual I, is not your ego. It's not this body. It's not your beliefs. It's not your thoughts. It's not your sense perceptions. It's something very different. But because of the way things are set up, it's very easy for us to misidentify with the sense data that I'm getting from my body, with my thoughts and beliefs, what other people have told me about myself in reality. And it's very easy to create this illusion or this sense of a separate self. And again, we call that an ego. And then the ego has a tendency to misappropriate reality. It tends to think things belong to it that really don't. So again, my body, my child, my spouse, my ideas, my country, my religion. And again, because the ego isn't really real, it's constantly trying to invest self in these things or reinforce its sense of self through these things. So again, I pick up a belief, an idea, even things like diet, like people will identify with being paleo or keto or vegan or raw foodist or whatever. All these different things are religious beliefs, our political affiliations, all of these things, we invest a sense of self in those things. And then when those things are questioned or someone attacks those things, we actually feel personally attacked. Now, what I'd like to suggest to you is to begin to investigate this, begin to question those beliefs. And when we begin to question these beliefs, we can begin to see, if we really do a good job with it, we begin to see how the opposite belief can often be just as true as the belief that we subscribe to, or maybe even truer sometimes. And a great teacher to investigate this with is a teacher named Byron Katie. She came up with a spiritual practice that she to call the work. And it's a type of inquiry that you can go through with your thoughts and your beliefs and your ideas and recognize, get to the conclusion that actually what you believe to be true, the way that you saw it, your quote-unquote truth, actually isn't any more true than, say, the opposite, the exact opposite point of view. It's pretty mind-blowing when you go through this work to recognize that, okay, the belief that I hold so sacred and I think is so important that I'm willing to fight to the death for actually isn't any more true than the exact opposite belief. So as I've often said here, this teaching is really all about happiness, joy, peace, which lead us to compassion. So it really isn't meant to be selfish. It only seems selfish if we identify with the ego, because again, the ego says, this is myself. And so if I'm worried just about making this happy, then yes, it may seem very selfish. If I understand that the self is actually all of creation, which is what Zen teaches us, then I realize that to be selfish is to care for others and have compassion for others. Indeed, there are no others. There's only the self, which is the big self, which is the true self. But again, if we aren't there yet, if that's not our experience of reality, then we may have to do practices and things like that to try and gradually dissolve this very limited sense of self that most of us experience. And so this practice of not trying to hold on to your sacred beliefs is one way that you can start to do that. You can start to dissolve and weaken this separate sense of identity. So again, how do we do this? What do we do? Well, the next time you're talking with someone and they disagree with something that you say, they question an idea or a belief that you have, instead of immediately trying to argue your point, prove yourself right, instead of getting upset, you might listen. You might actually explore the idea on your own or with this person of your idea actually not being entirely true, or there being another perspective that is just as true. This has been my experience more and more lately, where I really get the sense that it's not that there's one truth, that we as human beings are only seeing a small fraction of a bigger picture, and depending on which point of view we're taking, the perception of truth changes quite a bit. So it's not about being right or having the right perspective, because there isn't one. That you could say being right or the truth is beyond any one particular perspective. And again, that I know that may be confusing, but this is really the truth. So as long as we have a perspective, we have a point of view, that isn't going to ultimately be true. It might be our experience, and it might also be our perspective. And there's nothing wrong, per se, with having a perspective, as long as it serves you. And how do you know it's serving you? It makes you happy. It brings you peace. It helps you cultivate compassion, forgiveness, understanding, and non-judgment of others. If it's not doing those things, then I would say it really probably is not serving you. If it's creating fear, if it's creating a sense of separation between you and other people, you maybe have made a different choice than other people have, and you feel separate from them because of that. So questioning thoughts, very, very important. And sometimes other people, again, will do that for us. They'll come along and say, hey, I don't think that's true, or they'll attack an idea that we have. And if we can be light with our thoughts, some of you have heard me say this in the past, if we can be light with our thoughts, instead of grasping onto them and holding onto them, no, this is the truth, we can relax and be open-minded, literally. And a thought might be there, and we like that thought, but we're willing to let it go and entertain and look at another thought that maybe is, again, even in opposition to the thought that we're so fond of. So in Buddhism, they talk a lot about non-attachment. And again, this is another practice of non-attachment. The other beliefs that ultimately we do want to investigate are, again, our beliefs about ourselves. This is very in-depth work, and it's usually best done with a teacher. If you'd like to do this type of work, you let me know. I'll be happy to do it with you. Maybe you have a teacher or someone you can do that work with. Maybe you can do it on your own, by all means. This is called self-inquiry, and we begin to investigate, again, these perceptions, assumptions, thoughts, beliefs, and sense perceptions that make us believe there's a separate self here. So anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for listening. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be able to share my experience with the spiritual path with you. I hope you get something from it. Again, thank you to my patrons who allow me to do this work and allow me to share this with a much wider audience than I normally would be able to. You really do make this possible. Thanks to everyone on YouTube and on Facebook for sharing this, on YouTube for giving me the thumbs up, for liking and subscribing and hitting the bell. All of those things, again, they help to spread the word. And I love to share this word with as many people as I can because of what it's done for me in my life. Once again, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. Leave them in the comments below. If you do want to work with me a little more closely, reach out and let me know. It's, again, my honor and privilege to do so. Until next time, namaste.